You are listening to Lighthearted, the official podcast of the United States Lighthouse Society. My name is Jeremy D'Entremont. Welcome. My co-host today is Bob Trapani Jr., Executive Director of the American Lighthouse Foundation. Hi, Bob.
Hi, Jeremy. Hey, it's great to be back with you again here.
Well, thanks for doing it, and I hope you notice I'm wearing my American Lighthouse Foundation hat today. So today is November 6th, 2022, and this is episode 198 of Lighthearted. In a few minutes, we're going to listen to part two of a two-part interview with four people who have been very important advocates for the lighthouses of the Kennebec River in Maine. Bob, I was just looking at an article you wrote about Doubling Point Lighthouse on your website, mainlightstoday.com. Again, for people who are interested, it's a really good site to check out, mainlightstoday.com. Seguin Light and Pond Island Lighthouse were established off the mouth of the Kennebec River very early in our history. And the city of Bath on the Kennebec was a very important shipbuilding center for a very long time, still is. The river had important logging and ice cutting industries as well. So I'm wondering, why do you think they waited so long to build these lighthouses in the late 1800s? 1898 is when they built a bunch of them on the Kennebec. Why did it take so long, do you think?
That's a great question, Jeremy. It's something that I've tried to think about myself over the years, and there's very little documentation that takes you into the mind of the Lighthouse Board at the time of why they would have waited. Of course, there were some private aids, as you know, on the certain bends and turns there on the river, but you go from 1821, when Pond Island marks the entrance, it's another 77 years that pass. And really one of the only pieces of evidence that I may have uncovered is a book by William Avery Baker, A Maritime History of Bath, Maine, and the Kennebec River region from 1973. And I just want to pull a quote here. Mr. Baker says, quote, "It has been said that no vessel was ever lost in sailing out of the Kennebec. Sailing in was another matter," end of quote. So I'm only taking it that over the years, because the Kennebec was not subject to, furious coastal storms, you're in the river, it's a little more protected. I think the tide and the current would have probably dictated vessels sail on, of course, on high tide, whether up or down the river, and during the day. So I can only imagine that was part of the reason why the Lighthouse Board at the time did not move faster on establishing these aids. We can look back at history and you see something like 3,000 plus vessels a year on the Kennebec, steamers plying daily. And at the same time, I don't know. Just a great question. It's a mystery that might be lost in time.
Yeah. Well, what you're saying makes a lot of sense. But in any case, the lighthouses they did establish in 1898 are pretty little light stations. It's a nice grouping of little wooden lighthouses there, very kind of serene settings.
You don't find anything else like it on the Maine coast, and you're on the Kennebec when you see those lights.
Yes, absolutely. So I also know you have a lot of personal experience with today's guests. Jim and Joyce Spencer have lived much of the year at the Keeper's House at Doubling Point Light Station for many years, going back to when Jim was quite young. And he was the spearhead behind the formation of the Friends of Doubling Point Light. I know, Bob, you've worked with them on Maine Open Lighthouse Day and other things over the years. Jim and Joyce are kind of stepping to the background at this point as the McLeans step forward. I'm wondering if you have any thoughts about the Spencers.
I sure do, Jeremy. Jim and Joyce Spencer have just been, I think I said this in the last podcast, they really are truly quiet leaders in the Maine Lighthouse preservation movement. To me, they've led by example. They seek no acclaim. They just do their job. They go about it. They do it well. You just look at the grounds, how meticulous. I marvel at the station because not only is it preserved, but it retains this old charm about it. It has not been lost. It's almost as if the place is sort of not far removed from its glory days. It's really amazing. I think the other thing too is that when you think about the Maine Open Lighthouse Day, as you mentioned, that is no easy event to pull off there down in Doubling Point Light there. As you know, the road down in there is very narrow. There's very little parking. The fact that the Spencers were very open all these years to having that event and coordinating, making sure, I don't even know how they pulled that off with all the parking down there. But people who I've heard visiting that site just absolutely love the fact that that lighthouse was part of the event. And also just the fact that people got to meet the Spencer and the McLeans over the years. I've heard nothing but great stories. So no, the Spencers are really, though they're stepping aside, their contributions are not stepping aside. They're going to continue to shine on there at Dublin Point Light.
I completely agree with everything you're saying. And it's not an easy place to handle a lot of visitors coming in there at once. The road isn't made for it. The parking isn't made for it, but they've done a great job handling it over the years. So the other guests in today's interview are Karen and Dan McLean. Karen was the Coast Guard keeper based at the Kennebec River Range Light Station on the Kennebec River, obviously, for a few years in the 1980s. And in that position, she was also, in addition to being in charge of the range lights there, she was also in charge of Doubling Point Light and Squirrel Point Light, as well as their fog signals. And please, I'd like your opinion on this, Bob, but there are a lot of women keepers under the old civilian lighthouse service, but there were very few female keepers under the Coast Guard from the time the Coast Guard took over managing lighthouses in 1939. One woman who was a keeper in that period was Fanny Salter. She was at Turkey Point, Maryland for a long time, but I believe she remained a civilian. I think she, even though she was there into the Coast Guard era, I think she remained a civilian until she retired. Do you know of any other Coast Guard, female Coast Guard light keepers, Bob? I think what Karen did is really pretty unique.
I am aware, and I unfortunately do not know the name of the woman, but I'm aware that the Coast Guard did refer that there was at least another woman or two that were lighthouse keepers, but my understanding was that Karen, as officer in charge of the station, was very unique and possibly the only one. I think for me, when I look back at that time, it kind of got lost in the shuffle of automation. To me, that time is really one of the most overlooked and underappreciated times of Coast Guard lightkeeping history. In that final years, I think more people were just sort of lamenting the idea that the lighthouses were going to be automated and in a way not fully appreciating somebody like Karen, who was doing this job at the end but was part of that continuum of lighthouse keepers. I think we could have done a better job, looking back at that period of time and saying what she did was incredibly special. When I read articles from that period of the 80s, I'm struck by the fact that, they were Karen and her husband Dan were so even keel and humble in this assignment, even though they were history in the making there. It's pretty amazing. I like one quote, was an article written by Leanne M. Robichaud in the Village Soup of March 29th in 2007. It was entitled Keepers Share Their Story of Lighthouse Duty. They had done a presentation at the Maine Lighthouse Museum in McLean's. And one of the things that struck me was the family part that was so important. It was evident the family was important to the McLean's. And Karen is quoted as saying, both of the children just loved being little lighthouse kids. It was a family thing, referring to her son Dylan and her daughter Allie. I think another thing too was when Karen mentioned something to the fact that though she was doing something very important, she herself didn't put herself on that pedestal. In a May 1985 Down East magazine article, I love this quote by her. It's, quote, "I'd love to meet and talk with some of the old timers, but things have changed so much that I'm afraid what I do wouldn't impress them very much," end of quote. I think they would have been impressed, quite frankly, because just the idea that lighthouses had continued on, and here she was, this history-making woman in that position. I think that would have been an impressive thing for them. But again, there was a very humble attitude towards what they did, and I think that was true of a lot of lighthouse keepers, and I think they continued that legacy.
Yeah, well, that's definitely true. And I'll just mention, you mentioned Leanne Robichaud, who wrote that article you quoted. Her husband, Joseph Robichaud, was the officer in charge of the Kennebec River Range Light Station just before the McLeans, I believe.
That's right.
Leanne has a personal tie to that place as well. So before we go to the second part of the two-part interview with the Spencers and the McLeans, Bob, you have any other thoughts about the lighthouses in the Kennebec River?
I do, Jeremy. I think the Kennebec River lights present something that no other lighthouses in Maine can really offer people today. And that is during the winter, the ice season on the Kennebec is just amazing. You can read history accounts of how difficult it was for keepers to cross that river when the ice was running. or how rescues were needed to occur because people were trapped either on ice or in the ice floes and threatened to be taken downriver. But even today, you go through the winter and then suddenly you get a thaw in January, February. Those ice floes coming down from above Bath can be quite damaging and destructive if you really if that thaw really in the rain sweeps that down. And then in March and April, when the ice starts to break up and this naturally starts to move out on the tides, it oftentimes big chunks of these cakes get caught up on the riverbanks. They're just flat out amazing to see. I know from personal visiting there personally, it was the sight is one thing, but the sound is another. You hear this cracking, you hear the collisions of the ice, you hear the ice flows going up against the buoy that's off of Doubling Point Light. So that metal and ice, it's quite eerie. It's because it's very quiet and all you hear is these sounds from the ice. So if nobody's ever seen that place in the wintertime when the ice is running, it's quite an amazing sight and sound.
Interesting. I have not really experienced that. I've been there in the early spring, like in March when there was still ice and snow on the ground, but not so much in the river, I think. So you're making me feel the need to get there this this coming winter in the middle of ice season. I think that sounds really interesting. But they're such beautiful places any time of year, really, really, really special. All right, so let's listen to part 2 of my conversation with Karen and Dan McLean and Joyce and Jim Spencer now. So before we move on to other subjects, I want to give you an opportunity if there are any other really memorable experiences there. I'm sure there must have been. But like storms that stand out, I imagine you occasionally got unusual visitors. Maybe there's something like that. But anything that really stands out in your memory there?
Fish kills. Back in the heyday of the bluefish in the river and the pogies, there were a lot of pogies back then as well. The bluefish, when they started a feeding frenzy, the pogies in their fear would school up in a tight bunch. And that would deplete the oxygen in the water. And they would kill themselves and the bluefish and anything else in that water area. So there were 3 instances that we had these species of fish up on our marsh.
All the whole shoreline.
Until they just melted into the marsh.
Wow.
Almost literally. The flies that they bred were amazing. There was a hum over the marsh the whole time.
Smell must have been amazing.
Smell wasn't good at all, no. Fortunately, having been in Gloucester for a few years prepared us for that aroma.
Yeah.
It was such a great fishing village back then.
Yeah. Pervasive fish smell on the waterfront.
So Hurricane Gloria in 1985 was significant for this area. So we lost electricity for 1 week during Hurricane Gloria.
We lost everything in the freezer. We had a big stand-up upright freezer.
Maine had a significant flood. That was in 1987. So there was a lot of debris and very high water in the river.
Yeah.
That was something
There was almost a week where you had no incoming current at Doubling Point. The water for over a week just came downriver. There was still a rise and fall, a vertical rise and fall.
Yeah.
But there was no upriver current. There was so much volume coming out of Maine after those storms. And it was a spring runoff on top of 2 big storms.
Yeah.
Right. And again, I can't help but remember the girls from high school. That was quite an experience for me. And our change of command was pretty special as well.
When Dan took over for you,
yes.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah, it was in the winter of '87. I had gone to Booth Bay, and as I mentioned before, and when it was time for Karen to be transferred, the automation was still predicted to happen anytime. So it was an easy decision when we approached the captain in Portland if we could make this transfer happen, that I would be transferred from Booth Bay to the light station, and she'd be transferred from the light station to his command in Portland and work as a group duty officer, which is usually a 24 to 36 hour shift. And then she's off 48 to 72 hours.
48.
They readily agreed to that. It was a no-cost transfer for the Coast Guard. So 2 members were transferred with $0 spent on the transfer and didn't disrupt the lighthouse automation.
Another thing I wanted to ask you, and a question about wildlife. I was there. I visited both the Doubling Point Station here and the Range Light Station. I know it was June 2001. I was with Jean Guichard, who's a very famous French photographer.
Yes.
Took the famous
Wave
picture of the
coming
wave
up.
coming around La Jamont Lighthouse.
Her school.
Yeah. So I spent a few days with him helping him to get to some Maine lighthouses, including these, for a book he was working on. And when we were at the Range Lights, we were pretty sure we saw an otter swimming in the water there. I'm wondering, were we imagining things, or is that something you remember seeing when you were there, or no?
Perhaps you saw a river otter. They can, be in ocean water, salt water, or fresh water. We typically will see seals.
Since we came back to this beautiful house and lighthouse this spring, I have noticed the water clarity has improved significantly since we were here in the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
You couldn't see 6 to 8 inches down back then, from my recollection, and now, if at the right tide, you can see bottom around the lighthouse almost 2.5, 3 feet down.
Yeah.
In the rockweed. So I don't think I ever saw a river otter back then, but I did see muskrats. So I don't know.
Yeah.
I saw beaver.
Yeah.
Maybe it was a beaver we saw. We saw the head a bit and saw something swimming. It was really hard to see.
At the Range Lights, there's a little creek that often has enough water for a small mammal like a beaver.
I think
or
I've seen a
muskrat.
beaver lodge around there, around the
Yes,
Range Lights.
the smaller ones would go up in there, and turtles were always in there as well.
Mm-hmm.
But other wildlife in this area, deer, fox,
Yeah.
beautiful eagles, osprey.
There were no no sewage cleaning in any of the villages all the way up to Augusta. Just raw sewage was pumped into the river. And I learned to swim here, and I have antibodies to every possible bacteria. and now the river is clean
It is
almost.
good.
And
Yeah.
Yes, much improved.
Yeah.
Yes.
identical to the Hudson in New York in a sense.
The Kennebec River Range Light Station and the other stations nearby here are among the last stations in the country to be automated, the lights and the fog signals. So how much of a role did you play in the last days of the stations there as they were being automated?
It was a huge surprise to us. Received orders New Year's Eve.
Well, I reported aboard New Year's Eve. Yeah.
To the Coast Guard cutter Sanibel and Woods Hole.
Okay.
And the lighthouse was not automated yet. So the Coast Guard transferred me back from South Portland to the Kennebec River Light Station to see it through automation. So while Dan was down in Woods Hole on the ship, the kids and I prepared the property for automation, which occurred July 1990.
Mm-hmm. Which makes it real close to possibly the last one. I know Goat Island.
Yes.
Goat Island in Kennebunkport was right up there, I think, around that time.
Yes, indeed. Yeah. In terms of a Coast Guard family lighthouse, the Goat Island Lighthouse and our lighthouse they were automated the same week.
Mm-hmm.
We were automated on Tuesday, and Goat Island was automated on Thursday, being the last family lighthouse to be closed.
Wow. And I know, of course, around that time, Boston Light was slated to be the last one to be automated, but that didn't happen at that time because of legislation that was passed to keep somebody there.
Exactly.
I've had Sally Snowman, the keeper of Boston Light, on the podcast as well.
But I'm not sure that was ever a family lighthouse.
It was. You're absolutely right.
So
So
men attached.
yes, it was earlier, but in its last days, it was just a stag station. of the
Yes,
Coast Guard.
right. That's what we call them, stag
Stag
stations.
station.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah. And now it's a womaned station with a woman keeper today. So let me turn back to you, Joyce and Jim. It's my understanding that you have not been living here in this keeper's house at Doubling Point recently, and that actually Karen and Dan have lived here for this past summer. Correct me if I don't have that right. But in addition to them living here lately, Karen and Dan are also taking lead roles with the Friends of Doubling Point Light at this point. You have been so involved with it for so many years. I don't know if you have any thoughts about kind of stepping back from that at this point, and after so many years of living here and being involved with the group, how are you feeling about?
Well, you see, we started the Friends of the Doubling Point Light, and after and that was around 1996 or something. I think that it took over, and I became 65 in 2001, and so we had already got this organization working, and we sold our house in Connecticut, and we lived up here for a couple of years, and it's a small house. We had 3 kids and stuff, so we decided to build another house where my parents had property on the other side of the island. So eventually we moved over there, and but I would come here every day essentially, and it was a wonderful experience, and I think the McLeans are enjoying a little bit of it too, having these visitors. And I would walk out there to the lighthouse and open it up, and particularly with children, I'd take them up and show them how the light went on at night because of the sensor there, and it was really. I mean, I've done this practically for 20 years, and I've really enjoyed it. It's been my second career. I was a physician beforehand, and now I've been a lighthouse aide, essentially. And on the other hand, I'm 86, and I'm failing in certain ways, and it's time for me to release this, and it really is the biggest pleasure in the last year was when I got a call back from the McLeans saying yes. They would like to do what we had asked. We couldn't think of any family more totally appropriate to take over running the Friends of the Doubling Point Light. And that's been thrilling, actually.
Yeah, we were blessed, just blessed.
Yeah. It sounds perfect. It seems perfect from every.
And I've noticed that Karen. She started keeping a diary here, which she goes out and talks to people. But I mean, that was really when Jim says it was his second career. He came, he said, he came over every day, but he'd come home and tell me about the people he met, where they were from. Sometimes it would be from Germany. Often from
Australia.
Out of state. And you could never tell by the cars in the driveway because they fly in and then they rent a main car.
There has been some friction or concern from neighbors on the road because of the amount of traffic that has increased.
Very popular.
It's a one-lane road, and it's a private road. But because of my experience, I feel that this is a public asset that really should not be taken away from the public. And I'm hoping and I believe we're going to continue to have visitors here for the next, until the tide rises so high that the lighthouse is going to have to.
Let's hope that doesn't happen too soon. Right. It could happen, but let's hope it's a ways off. But I was going to ask you about that, about the road. Actually, when we were driving up here today, car was coming the other way and had to pull over. I've experienced it a number of times. It must occasionally create problems, like on Maine Open Lighthouse Day when the place is open. I imagine the traffic gets a little crazy.
We've been doing that for many years, and we've had as many as it was over 200 this year. It was up pretty close to that before. But I've been sitting here watching the traffic just as you've been talking. It's gone on. I mean, this is off season.
There were people down in the cattails just a minute ago. I didn't know if they were picking them or taking pictures, but it's.
And this is a Monday. It's not. It's the weekend or anything. But it's a nice day right now.
We have. I don't know whether to even say it. We have well over 2,000 or 3,000 visitors a year. And
maybe you shouldn't put that in.
Well, we are not advertising for more visitors.
Right, I understand that.
And,
Yeah.
and
Yeah, there's a certain balance I think you have to try
well,
for.
yes, and McLean's. When my children come up here for their vacations, as they have been doing for several years, they say, you can't even sit out there and without somebody coming up and talking to you, or somebody's having a wedding and we didn't know about it. When we were here, people would call up politely and we would arrange a date for them to have that. Now apparently some people just think they have a right to do it. So there's some issues there that have to be looked at and taken care of.
Yeah.
You've already put up. We used to have visitors all day long. I mean, our brochure still says that the grounds are open 24/7.
Mm-hmm.
And only a year or two ago, it was decided that we'd make it 9 to 5. And
We have a board,
McLean's have been pretty good.
8-member board.
Mm-hmm.
It's a discipline, but it is a historical asset, and I feel the same way about the range lights. To be honest, I don't think they should be closed from people
Yeah.
coming. Somebody wanted to turn it into a public boat station, but it's an unsuitable piece of land for that.
Yeah.
And that would be more parking than could possibly be done. And, I could talk forever. I won't.
Yeah.
I'll quit.
Well, I'm glad you feel that way about these places, that there should be some public access. Again, I know it's you got to strive for this balance where you don't want to be overwhelmed because there's the road and the parking areas and the environment can't support huge numbers of visitors. But it seems like you've achieved a pretty good balance with that. They're such beautiful places.
We have felt that the balance was good, and most of the people on the road accept it and are pretty happy with it. Every once in a while, some imbecile comes down here with a bus or an overnight thing, or somebody came in with an enormous truck and stopped in the middle of the road, and some neighbor got really incensed about it.
Well, yeah.
I won't go into more detail. We did have one very exciting set of visitors, the Model A Club. Was down here with about 20 ancient, beautifully maintained Model A's, and they were really excited. But I think they had called.
Oh yeah, we arranged
it.
Mm-hmm.
And
that must have been something.
And Ted Panatoff used to bring senior college people here. He taught a course on lighthouses and took them to different lighthouses.
I know Ted.
He did that several times.
Yeah.
So aside from the regular visitors, and we had a group from the plant home once, a small group, brought some very older than we are people over here.
Yeah.
And I think we got some of them out onto the walkway, but the others just stayed in the vehicle and looked at and took pictures.
Yeah. Do school tours come here at all?
We've had somebody ask about it, but it hasn't happened. I remember we had a second grade teacher who came here during Maine Open Lighthouse Day once, and she asked if she could bring a class, and we said certainly, but she never got in touch with us. So, however, we've had Morse High School kids take their graduation pictures and things down here.
Sure.
And lots of engagements. Some of them, they've gotten in touch with us ahead, and I've taken pictures of the young future groom, getting down on his knee. One up in the tower, I caught it from that door.
Wow.
He was so thrilled to have that picture.
Yeah. I've been involved in some of those at Portsmouth Harbor Light.
Visitors are usually driving very slowly because they're very nervous about the one, and I don't think they do a lot of road damage. The most of the road damage is because of weather and potholes. And there are a couple of the people who live here who occasionally drive very fast indeed.
Yeah. I think there was some pothole repair going on towards the main road today when we came in.
There was, and when we drove there.
It's a never-ending problem.
I'm sure.
Yes.
Well,
yeah. So we talked about the renovation, the restoration of the foundation of the lighthouse earlier. I know there's been a lot. I was here a few years ago when the tower was being reshingled. That was a fairly major project.
We've done reshingling, painting several times. The walkway has been repaired several times. The original walkway was all the way up here to the lighthouse, to this cottage, the McLeans and other people on the board have helped in maintaining this material for years. So we've had help.
I want to just add one thing about shingles.
Yeah.
The shingles on this keeper's quarters are the original shingles.
Wow.
They were so thick, so good.
They're beautiful.
We've had it painted ourselves since we've owned it twice at least with a very good painter who does good preparation. But imagine these are the same shingles.
1898.
And they haven't lasted that long out there. Of course, it's more exposed, but still,
Right.
the quality of what you get now is not what you got before.
Yeah.
You talked about the wind. The wind here is, I think, probably almost as incredible.
The northwest, yes. You get a nice, strong northwest
You
wind,
would
yeah.
never find no wind here.
Yeah. So Karen and Dan, what led you to take these more active roles you're now taking with Friends of Doubling Point Light?
These two very convincing friends of ours here convinced us that this would be a good thing for the future of the lighthouse.
Yeah.
So we caved.
Well, you don't.
I would add that there was a big smile on your face.
Yeah. I was going to say, you don't seem too broken up about it.
You moved in here because it's identical to the house
Yes.
at the range.
It reminded them of their youth at the range.
We're loving it.
The look on your face was really charming when you moved in, I think, that first day. And I think you said, I feel as if I've come home.
Yes.
Because this house is identical to the
Very
range
much
light
so. It is.
cottage. And to the other cottages on the
Yes.
river, too.
There's a well-known, very old phrase that says, there's no going back. Well, Joyce and Jim and their daughter Margaret have allowed us the unusual opportunity, something we never dreamed would ever happen again, to come back to a Coast Guard keeper's cottage on Doubling Point. And it's been wonderful.
Yeah.
Although, I will say, back in the good old days when we were stationed at the range lights, I would ask my officer in charge wife, can we go have a picnic today? And she was always so busy. I don't think we ever did take that picnic. Similar situation is occurring right now here as well. Because it just so happens that since we came back, we've had the annual Friends meeting. We've had the minutes to write up.
Yeah.
Then we've had the newsletter to get ready. And we want to, one of the biggest projects we have going right now is we're in the design phase of a new parking area.
Oh, okay.
Further up the road, a little bit away from this dwelling so that there's a little more privacy for the inhabitants. But primarily, it's going to be a safer and more direct route to the light because there's a path already exists. It's actually the Coast Guard's easement to the light. So we'll hopefully have a little bit bigger parking area, and this will be used only as overflow for the dwelling guests.
Fortunately, we found an engineer that we went to the town with our proposal for the new parking area, and we were asked to get a site engineer to do some design work and some plans. And we are looking forward to seeing what they think we're able to do and still stay within the limits that the town would like to see us happen. So we're looking forward to seeing what they come up with, how they want to orient the new parking areas.
Yep.
But it's a win-win for the guests and for the people that might be residing in the cottage to get some more privacy. It's a beautiful walk down there. It's along the shore. It's not as steep as coming down the little hill that they come down now.
Yeah.
So also, we have found from reviewing reviews and for talking to people, they feel as if they might be intruding on someone's privacy and
Right.
trespassing to a degree. And this will eliminate some of that
Mm-hmm.
for our guests. They feel more comfortable coming along the walkway down right to the tower.
Yeah.
Walkway.
That sounds like a great idea.
Yes.
I like it.
We're looking forward to that.
Maybe by next season, maybe, or maybe not quite that soon.
We again, right now we're waiting for the engineer to come,
Yeah.
check the site, and do up his plans.
Mm-hmm.
We're hoping to be done before
It's
spring.
going to be hard for people who've been coming here for the last 20 years or 40 years
They'll be confused.
To have to realize that they're going a different way.
But we have vision for the new parking area. We're going to put up a kiosk, which will give the history of the Kennebec River, of the lighthouses, and the different guidelines that we'd like for them to follow while they're here.
Yeah.
So I think it's going to be a wonderful opportunity for the visitors and for the Spencer family and Margaret's family.
I think it sounds perfect. So, of course, the Lighthouse Tower is not generally open for climbing. It is open one day a year in September on Maine Open Lighthouse Day, right? As you talked about
Yes.
that a bit earlier. Have there been any thoughts of opening it more, or what's happening with that?
To actually enter the tower,
Yeah,
again, it's having a presence here.
yeah,
And we came aboard this summer, and we've enjoyed it. And we do similar to Jim. We love going down there when our time allows, and when they have the extra time to spend with us, taking people up into the tower. But on a regular basis, until we can find a volunteer on a regular basis, we just can't advertise that.
sure.
But it's like by chance, and whenever it can happen, people are so appreciative, and they really enjoy getting up in there.
But we have no paid staff, and you can't have that lighthouse can't be open with nobody
Right.
who's in charge.
No, and
Yeah.
we are in a unique situation where the access roads to this lighthouse, as we've mentioned earlier, are privately maintained, privately owned roads. So we are trying to strike a balance, and we just don't advertise or increase what we're
Yes.
currently offering to
Yeah.
help keep that balance
Yeah.
between the neighbors and the visitors, that we want to keep it accessible, just like Jim and Joyce always have.
Yeah.
We want it to remain accessible to the public. We want to continue the educational opportunities and even those special interest opportunities with the weddings and whatnot. So all that information is going to be on our updated website. Hopefully you'll see it live even this week.
Oh, wow.
So there'll be clarity, and without offering more than what we already
Yeah.
are able to provide.
Yeah, well, that sounds great to me. And just to clarify again for people who are listening, the Lighthouse Tower is not open except at this point on Maine Open Lighthouse Day in September. And what will happen in the future is you'll figure it out as time goes on. But I don't want people coming here thinking that they can climb the lighthouse. And when we say climb the lighthouse, there's also a ladder on the outside. People are not supposed to climb that. We're talking about when it's open, the door is open, and then you go up the stairs inside the lighthouse.
And someone's present from the Friends of the
Right.
Doubling Point Light organization to guide them, to answer questions,
Yep.
and to make sure their experience is
Yeah.
safe and
We don't want people climbing that ladder.
correct.
Yeah. I'm sure it's been tried.
Yes.
Almost every day.
Despite the fact that there are 2 signs right
Mm-hmm.
in their face as they climb up the ladder, they
Yeah.
still do it.
Yeah.
Of course, we have foreign speakers.
That must be it. They don't speak English. That must be it. Yeah.
That must be it.
Yeah.
People that don't know how to read.
So we're getting to the end here, and I appreciate your time so much. But I want to ask you both a final question for bonus points, okay? All right. I'm going to start with Karen and Dan. And this is a pretty broad question. You can take it anywhere you want to. But what have you enjoyed most about your years of involvement with the lighthouses here on the Kennebec River?
It's an era that has gone by. There's so much history on this river. My mind wanders sometimes to, is it Benedict Arnold? Is it the Clipper ship? Is it this island and all the surrounding area denuded of all trees because of all the shipbuilding that's gone on? It's an amazing history, and I'm just feel so privileged to be part of it in some small way and to enjoy the beauty of the whole area. I pinch myself all the time.
It's definitely been a privilege to have had the opportunity to serve the Coast Guard at a lighthouse, an active lighthouse. And to be able to come full circle after we had our son and daughter born this summer, to have the bonus to see Dan walk that same walkway with our grandson and our granddaughter, it's like our hearts were just melting to have that chance. And the friends that we have met here on Doubling Point and the memories we've created, as the Spencers have said, talking to our guests, learning about, the areas that they come from, and just seeing the joy in their eyes, having an opportunity to visit a lighthouse on the Maine coast. Sharing that with them has also been special.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the neighbors are very welcoming. They love the lighthouse. They're probably a little bit jealous that they can't have it to themselves all the time. But they love it, and they're so pleasant to be around and welcoming, and they tolerate a lot with the traffic in and out.
They do.
Yeah.
I can't say anything better than what they've said, especially meeting the people who've been here, watching special moments. We've had two larger weddings of people who live on the road, and I like to think about the Merritt Pinkham and his family, who were here for 33 years or 31 years. I have it written
Something
down
like
here.
that, yeah.
What they lived through and endured. We have a wonderful letter from Fred Pinkham, the youngest son of Merritt, describing what life was like here. I'm going to give it to you. You may have seen it already, and another copy for Karen and Dan. But I imagine trying to do the cooking, dealing with the water from the cistern and the pump. The pump was actually at the kitchen sink when I was married to Jim, and when we moved in here. We've modernized this kitchen with little cute tiles and things and a refrigerator. But we have pictures of Merritt Pinkham with the ducks that he's caught. Their trusty little dog who was sitting out here on the porch. We've gotten some wonderful pictures from some of his granddaughters. And it's been exciting. And we also have to thank Jim's aunt and godmother, how they heard about that advertisement. They lived in Connecticut, but they must have read about it in a magazine or even the New York Times or something. And to come up here as two maiden ladies they were, and how lucky we were that we inherited all of this, with their foresight and just the nature around here. When our daughter was married down here, when everybody left, I realized in my pictures there was a little newborn deer, a fawn, down here in the bulrushes, and we cleaned up the tables and we wondered what happened, and eventually we noticed it was gone. The mother came and got him out of there without us even seeing. But it's just been a miracle to be here.
Yeah. Just a little bit about the lighthouse originally. The original keeper could not drive here. They had to come by boat, and they rowed a boat across the river, and they had to row a boat across the river to go to school. A road was originally built, I believe, or at least the track was made by the Coast Guard, because there was nobody else down here except for the range keeper.
Right.
There was an old house, we called it the Courier Place, which now is owned by a new family. It's been redone, but it's a colonial house. But basically, they were really all by themselves here, and of course there was no plumbing, there was no drinking water, a cistern with the seagulls, of course, assisting the water getting into the cistern.
And there's a well up the road, which is where the drinking water
the well up that you go by that pipe up there, and that was the drinking water place. Occasionally an animal would fall in. At any rate, it was a totally different lifestyle back in the colonial, or not colonial, in the early period of this life.
Yeah.
When it was built in 1898. And the amount of traffic on the river was up to 3,000 ships a year. And of course, essentially, it's completely different.
Yeah.
There was a period when ice was a big product.
Yeah.
And the upriver was porting Kennebec River ice all over the world.
Yeah.
Or at least all over the South America, as well as, at any rate, it's all very interesting stuff. I mean, there's a lot of history that, and of course, Bath was a major shipbuilding for the sailing vessels. I mean, you know,
City
all
of
this
ships.
stuff.
Yeah.
You've written a lot about it and stuff.
I'm glad you brought all that up. There is tremendous history here, and I feel like there's a lot of ground we needed to cover today. Maybe we can do it again sometime, because there's a lot of history here we haven't really touched on. But I'm glad you, Joyce and Jim, I'm glad you brought that into it.
Here they come. Here they come.
Yeah, as we speak, people are walking over to the lighthouse. If you have a lighthouse, people will come. There's no doubt about that. So I feel like I hate to cut it short here. I'm enjoying this so much, speaking with all four of you. Yeah.
Well, thank you for doing it.
And we've learned so much about the McLeans we didn't know before.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Karen and Dan and Joyce and Jim. It's really, really been a pleasure. Thank you for hosting Charlotte, my wife, and I in the house here today, and for taking part in the podcast. Much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you.
All good. Thank you.
Just a reminder, you can read more about the Friends of Doubling Point Light at doublingpoint.org.
So, Bob, in addition to being the executive director of the American Lighthouse Foundation, you're also a lighthouse technician for the Coast Guard. You're in the Coast Guard Auxiliary. Have you had any interesting service visits to any Maine lighthouses recently?
I sure have, Jeremy. I mean, recently, in the last couple of months, there's been services at places like Pond Island Light, which we spoke a little bit about. And, you know, that when you go there at this point in the year when the birds are all going, because that's a protected island for terns and common eiders. I was just shocked at the amount of mosquitoes that were still on that island. And I mean, they made you want to stay inside that lighthouse. It was like, you know, it's like, I'm not going out. I'm just going to stay right in here and finish up the service, and we're going to get out of here when it's done. Another one recently was Lubec Channel Light in Lubec. And it was an interesting one. The service there is not very difficult, but every time I get on that light, I can't help but think of Connie Small.
Yeah.
And her stories in her book, a wonderful book that, you know, thankfully the Friends of Portsmouth Harbor Lighthouses has had reprinted. Yeah, there's a sense of history there for me personally because of her book and because of her memories of that. So, but yeah, I mean, each one of these services, they can be very routine, but at the same time, you also know you're walking in the steps of the keepers before you. And so there is that sense, even if it's not profound, you just know that it's there, and they can all be a little bit interesting in their own right.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, you're making me think about Connie's stories of Lubec Channel Light. For people who might not know, Connie wrote the book, The Lighthouse Keeper's Wife. You mentioned when she was 85 years old. And one of the stories she told is that she was like 19 when she married her husband, Elson, who's a few years older. And he was assistant keeper at Lubec Channel Light to Connie's uncle, right? Loring Myers was Connie's uncle. He was the principal keeper. Elson was an assistant. Connie didn't live there at Lubec Channel Light. It's a spark plug type caisson light out in the water. But the first time she went to visit, she was scared to death. She said, I can't do that. She didn't want to climb the like 30-foot ladder up into the entryway. And Elson said, don't worry, you'll be fine. He said, just when you go up the ladder, just look up, don't look down. I'll be right behind you. And of course, that was her motto for the rest of her life. Always look up, never look down. And
you know, that's an awesome story. I'm glad you recounted that, Jeremy. And you know what? Back in 2000, when the cutter Thunder Bay repainted Lubec Channel Light at the time, prior to its private ownership today, I know they left a little note above one of the windows that said Connie Small was here. I look at that every time I go. It's fading a little bit these days, but I look at that every time I'm on the light. And speaking of, as a Coast Guard auxiliary, and speaking of the McLeans, I have this little tie-in because I noticed this from I believe this was the November-December issue of the ATON Bulletin, Aids and Navigation Bulletin that the Coast Guard put out in the 80s. And it said, quote, life at the light can be restrictive. The keeper can only be away 4 hours during the day and only in good weather. To take a weekend off, Dan must find an auxiliarist to watch the light, an arrangement that works very well. That would have been kind of cool as an auxiliarist to be able to get a call from somebody like Dan and say, hey, I need some time off. Do you want to come over and watch the light? So a little tie into the past there.
Oh yeah, that is really interesting. I wasn't aware of that. So Bob, I want to thank you for hosting this double podcast episode about doubling Point Light and the other lights on the Kennebec. I also want to thank you again. I know I said it last time, but it's worth saying again. Thank you for your help recently with the U.S. Lighthouse Society tour we did in Down East Maine that I was part of. It's always great having your participation in those tours. So thank you again, Bob.
Oh, you're very welcome, Jeremy. And I know we discussed it, but when you see people coming from all over, getting to enjoy Maine lighthouses like we did and have such fine weather and just the camaraderie, that fun, that joy makes what we do, all of us, what we do in lighthouses so much more, it just raises our spirits. It elevates the reasons why it's so important to work and save these lighthouses so that we can pass them on. So no, that tour was outstanding. And the U.S. Lighthouse Society does a great job providing people with that opportunity to see things that otherwise they may or may not be able to see on their own. So
right. Yeah. And speaking of that, I'll be involved with some of the USLHS Lighthouse Society domestic tours in 2023. We're working on the itineraries as we speak, including one on Long Island, New York, one in Northern Lake, Michigan. Again, the itineraries are still being finalized. They'll be on the USLHS site, website, uslhs.org as soon as possible. Probably, I'm going to say within the next couple of weeks. There are also some exciting international tours in the works for next year, including Iceland and Patagonia, Spain also, I believe. So, Bob, back to Maine after we went abroad for a minute there, but do you have any quotes about Maine by any chance?
I do. This is from the author Mae Davidson. She wrote in her book entitled Whatever It Takes, quote, "My attachment to the state is that of a barnacle to a ledge, the pull of the moon to the earth. Maine, because of its singular and profound beauty, is a place of worship without walls. I love it so," end quote. That's awesome.
Yeah, I think it's an awesome quote too. Thanks, Bob. I've spent most of my life living in Massachusetts, the Boston area, been in New Hampshire for more than 20 years now, but I would have to say I love the Maine coast probably more than any other area that I've ever seen. It's pretty special.
It very much is, Jeremy. I think, when you think about the thousands of islands that dot this off the coast here of Maine, you think about the fact that we have in this state something like the Windjammer Association, the Maine Windjammer Association. So you've got all these historic vessels that are sailing and plying the waters for, it allows us to kind of feel like we're going back in time. Our lighthouses, so many of them, as you know, are offshore. And I think that's, they're in wave-swept areas. They're just remote, desolate areas. For somebody, a lighthouse enthusiast who wants to go see them, it's quite an effort you have to make. And it's a multi-year effort in a lot of cases. To be able to say, hey, I've seen all of Maine's lighthouses, but when you do, the joy and satisfaction of saying, I conquered such a challenge is very awesome. So, no, Maine is, and the seasons. I think the seasons are incredible. I mean, the autumn is always great here. You've got the winter, which is amazing. A lot of people don't see it. A lot of people don't want to see it, but it is quite amazing. And of course, Acadia, you get a place like that in this state, and it's just like, that's breathtaking. That's a nature's cathedral there. So yeah, Maine's pretty special.
Yeah, nature's cathedral, you said it. And what you said rings true to me about it being a challenge to see all the Maine lighthouses. It took me about 20 years. Some of the offshore ones I had to hire, charters just personally to people to take me out to some of the lights. The last one I got was Franklin Island in Muscongas Bay. It's not that it's that isolated, but you can't really see it from land, and there's no regular cruises that go anywhere near it. So I had to create the itinerary for a Friends of Flying Santa fundraising cruise that went near Franklin Island. That was how I finally got to photograph it as the last lighthouse in Maine. I think that was about 2007. I finally got them all, but it is a challenge. I get emails occasionally from people that will say something like, I'm coming to Maine for the weekend and I want to photograph all the lighthouses. Can you give me any advice? And I hate to break it to them, but you can't do it in a weekend. So, or even in a week or a month, it's not that easy.
No amount of money is going to change that fact, right?
Very true. Well, unless you take maybe charter a helicopter ride over the coast, but that's going to add up too. But that's cheating in a way. But I love seeing them. Nice seeing them from the air as well. So thank you again, Bob, and of course, as always, to our regular listeners and our new ones, thank you so much for listening, and
keep a good light.